Welcome, everyone, to the Lion Counseling Podcast. I'm Mark Odland, founder of Lion Counseling, and this is Zack Carter. Our mission is to help men obtain success and purpose, happiness, and peace in their career and their personal lives. And today we're talking about communication and specifically how to avoid arguments with your significant other.
Escape the cage now. Be the lion you was destined to be. Born ready for the war, now my effort is free. The level's been set, time to wrestle the beast. Testing my G, it's getting heavy indeed. The struggle I embrace now, never retreat. I see the test as a blessing indeed. I'm taking steps on the treacherous peak. Now it's destined to be. I'm on my destiny's feet. Shine with the one piece.
If you are looking for help in your life, feel free to reach out at escapethecagenow.com or check out the link in the description box. All right, so let's kick this off, Zack. In all your experience as a counselor, working with guys, working with couples, what would you say are some of the biggest reasons, or maybe one of the big reasons why couples argue?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is going to depend on, whether they're dating or married and,
Yep.
so there's going to be some overlap, but let's talk about marriages today, for instance.
Sure.
So I think some of the biggest things are things like money, sex, and, dividing up household chores, those kinds of things, who does what, right? Are oftentimes things that come up. I think it would be great to talk about like maybe using sex as an example for today on if you're fighting with your spouse around sex, right? You want more frequency. She wants less frequency. Sometimes it's also reversed.
Yep.
So like, what do? Well, the first thing I want you to realize is that sometimes you have to do prep in advance before you get into discussions, especially ones that have already gotten heated in the past. And so maybe some prep if you're out there saying like, what do I need to do to avoid this fight with my wife? You need to understand first that when you're angry, when you're anxious, the brain is designed to go into all or nothing thinking. Why? If we go back in time, you got the cavemen running around that they're near a bear, the bear's running at them, and they don't have the time to say like, oh, is this a brown bear? Is this a black bear? What kind of, like, is it dangerous? Is it not? No, it's like either I run or I die. Like those are the two options, right? And so our brain is designed physiologically to do that all or nothing thinking for survival, right? But what works with us in situations like being chased by a bear or being in traffic and almost being hit or being attacked by someone is not as good, is not always as beneficial when you're discussing problems with your wife. So first off, you want to figure out in a calm place away from the spouse, okay, what evidence do I have to my point? And what evidence does she have for her point, right? We want to begin to see nuance and not do that black or white thinking, that all or nothing thinking, okay? Because oftentimes the truth is somewhere in the middle, even if it's 80% you're in the right and 20% she's in the right. You need to kind of figure that out. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I'm always right, Zack, 100% of the time. So it's really hard for me to relate to this topic, but no, yeah,
I mean, it's so hard to relate.
There's a lot of wisdom there, right? Because there's humility. And chances are they have a point, we have a point. I mean, I'll tell couples sometimes, or if I'm working with someone who's pretty sure they're right and I'm not quite convinced, I might say, all right, let's just say you're 95% right. I'm thinking it's 50-50, but
yeah,
let's just say it's 95% right. Let's make sure you own that 5%. Like, let's be truthful about this situation. And by the way, if there's winners and losers in a marriage, that doesn't work so well, right? Like, how do you be a team that trusts each other moving through life together, through all of life's ups and downs, if there's winners and losers, right? So I feel like something about what you're saying about being humble enough to and actually trying to fire up that neocortex, right? To have the thinking brain online instead of feeling like we're in a survival situation, to be like, no, this is someone I love. They love me. This is not life or death. It's important. And by the way, if I'm in fight mode or if I'm in retreat mode, this communication is not going to work. And so I love what you're saying about taking ownership for your piece, thinking it through rationally, um, and yeah, getting that thinking brain going. It all seems like yeah, the way you said prerequisites almost to not just going in guns blazing and hope for the best.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and John Gottman, talks about criticism and defensiveness, and he says that the antidote, the fix for defensiveness is owning your part of the argument.
Mm,
So even if it's, to your point, Mark, 5%, maybe you raised your voice.
right.
Maybe I think, Mark, you were joking, but like I think that many men will acknowledge that oftentimes their wife is right. And sometimes that's frustrating because you want to be right, but oftentimes they're right, right? And so, but if you could, even if it is one of those situations where you are mostly in the right,
Yeah.
if you can say, you know what, I raised my voice, that's my 5% or that's my 10%.
Yeah.
Babe, let me apologize that I raised my voice. I really need to speak to you in a respectful, in a calm way. And I didn't do that. Right. And what you'll notice is that that's gonna oftentimes decrease the intensity of the argument. Not always, not always. There are people that will use that against you, but especially if you have someone that loves you and you love them back, a lot of times that will decrease the intensity,
Yeah.
right? So number one, get out of that all or nothing thinking, right? Try to see the nuance.
Yeah.
Secondly, here it goes, guys. I'm gonna say it again. If you've been listening to the other episodes, we're going to talk about emotions. Dun, dun, dun. So, what is this? This is an emotion wheel. Okay. This
No.
is your friend. No, not the emotion wheel. Yes. So, emotion wheel can be your best friend because you actually need to figure out not just what you're thinking, not just your logical arguments, but also the emotions and what's going on, right? Because just think about it for a second. If you tell the other person, I'm really pissed off at you, right? What do you think is going to happen on their end? Do you think they're going to be open to hearing your point of view? Are you open if they come at you that way? If they come at you with anger, right? Oftentimes that's going to cause more argument. So if you can figure out a different emotion other than anger, oftentimes they might be more receptive, right? And so you can find emotion wheels online. You don't have to buy one. I've bought one, but you can find them. They look really overwhelming. All you do is you start in the middle and then you work your way out to find out what you're feeling. And so maybe you figure out, okay, I want, like, it's not about anger, it's about I was disappointed in the situation, or I was confused by the situation, or I was overwhelmed, or I had insecurities come up. If we're honest, we had some insecurities. If you can figure that out, that's going to be helpful in this kind of prep stage to be able to communicate with your wife so that she's going to be less likely to escalate, right? Any thoughts, Mark?
Yeah. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense, right? Because even if you are a guy who values, say, stoicism, and you see the value of steadiness in your life and not living, being mastered by your emotions, like not being ruled by your emotions, it's like, yeah, that can be very true, but that doesn't mean neglecting your emotions because deep down, I mean, we want to have love in our lives. And the love that we have for our families, for our significant other, for our spouse, for our kids, for our community, um, deep down, if we're honest, that's really important. That's like the good stuff, like that makes life worth living, right? And so we don't want to neglect that part of our lives. We want to go after it with the same intentionality that we would say in our business, or some other avenue of life where we've seen success, hopefully. And but yeah, I mean, it tends to be a blind spot. It has for me, even in my life, where you can be rocking it in one area of your life, and then, I mean, man, it doesn't go over well when like you have a master's degree in therapy, and then you totally blow it in a conversation with your wife. It's like, I should
Oh,
know
so that's
this.
not just me.
I should know this.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so it's one of those things where you can never get enough reminders
Mhm.
of just knowing the rules of the game and knowing strategies that are more or less effective. And
Mhm.
often our spouses are wired a little differently than we are, and we have to meet them halfway to have a successful relationship. And
Mhm.
if we're going to operate in that supposedly logical mode when we're not really logical. It's just we're not shoving down the emotions. Then it's going to lead to a lot of disconnection in the relationship and not probably go very well. And so for yeah, I know when you brought up the feelings wheel, like I was worried my testosterone level was going to drop a few hundred points.
It dropped a little bit.
A
Let's just
little
be
bit.
honest.
Let's just be honest. I mean, but
For both of us.
but I think research probably shows that it goes back up again after the conversation's over. Let's just stick with
Yeah.
that for now.
You'll survive, guys, if you use the emotion wheel. You're going to be all right. All right. So
All right.
all that was so well said. It's so good to hear not just me, but other counselors like yourself, Mark, say, like we have these tools as well, but we're not perfect at them, and that we're doing our best, right? And so but we need to start with understanding what are the tools, right? Even if you're not using them perfectly, like
Right.
Mark and I are not using these perfectly, but we are trying to use them. And a lot of times for me and my wife, it's initially maybe I do the wrong thing initially, and then I come back when I'm level headed, and then like I do the right thing the second time. So if that's
Sure.
you out there, like you can come back, you can do a redo and try again, right? So, what do we actually do when we're in a better headspace, when we're coming back? Well,
Yep.
so I've mentioned John Gottman once. If you don't know who John Gottman is, he's like the premier researcher extraordinaire of couples relationships. Guy really knows what he's talking about. And he came up with this method of conversation that I use when I'm teaching people about confronting their boss, confronting family members, or confronting their wife, or just communicating with the other person that leads to less arguments while still getting your point across. And
Sure.
Gottman calls it the slow startup, right? So
Mm.
it's you talk about yourself versus talking about them. You avoid you statements, right? You want to talk about I statements, me, I, this is what's going on for me,
Mhm.
right? If you say you statements, they're gonna take it as criticism oftentimes, and it's gonna lead to the fight, right? So if you're trying to avoid the fight, talk about yourself. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about the emotion, right? So this is why I had you prepped already with the emotion wheel, is that you got to
Right.
figure out what you're actually feeling, right? And so if you're having a conversation around sex and you say, look, babe, I'm really feeling disappointed because I was hoping that you and I would be able to connect sexually more often, right? You're talking about you're not saying like, hey, it's really pissing me off that you won't have sex with me, right? Probably not going to go well.
Right.
Like, talk about yourself, right? Talk about the emotion. And then the last part. So if Gottman says I emotion and then express positive need, what is the need?
Mm.
Well, typically in a marriage, the need is I want to connect with you. I want to feel loved and want you to feel loved. I want to feel safe. I want you to feel safe. Right. So, whatever that underlying need is, you got to figure out what that need is. Right.
Mm.
It's not just about getting sexual release,
Right.
it's about connecting with your spouse. So, if you're using the slow startup, it would sound like something like, babe, I just wanted to let you know, I've been feeling kind of disappointed lately because I really want to connect with you sexually. We haven't been able to do that very frequently, right? So you're stating what the problem is. The problem isn't her. The problem is that the frequency of sex isn't happening. And the last point before I throw it to Mark is you ask the other person to solve the problem.
Mm.
Okay. Babe, what do you think we could do about this so that you feel like you're getting your needs met and I can feel like I'm getting my needs met? Right? And maybe she says, "Look, I don't have time for sex. I got all these kids running around. I got a job. I've got chores around that. Like I got all this stuff." Okay, sounds like things are crazy busy. What do you think we could do to make things less busy? Right? So once again, you ask them to solve the problem, right? So if she's saying it's busyness or maybe she doesn't feel loved, dang, what can I do? What can we do to make sure you're feeling more love so you're more open to sex?
Right.
Right? So this is how you're going to have a healthy conversation with your spouse. All right, Mark, take it away.
I
What
don't
are your
think I can add
thoughts?
anything, Zach. You nailed it. No, but yeah, I mean, there is genius in that approach. I think not only are you going in as the guy, right? So as the guy, we go into the situation, we've prepped ourselves, so it's not the all or nothing thinking. We're hopefully aware of our emotion, what the core emotion is, and the need. but we're not, but we're fairly calm as we go into that situation. And so we're not feeling like we're in a fight or flight situation. We're not feeling unsafe as we're talking, and we're not making them feel accused or attacked or unsafe as we deliver the message. And I mean that totally jives with my experience with couples as well, because I've tended to become more and more of a referee over the years when I do couples therapy, because some couples are able to sit there on the couch and really talk calmly to each other, and others they're so escalated, and there's so many triggers, so many things that spike painful emotions, that it's really hard for them to feel heard by each other, really hard to feel understood, and they both have such hurt inside. The problem is they talk over each other, they interrupt each other, and they're misinterpreting what the other person's saying. And and no wonder, right? If instead of a problem that you can solve together, and there's valid ideas on both sides, and we the baseline is we both love each other and want the best for each other, instead those insecurities start coming out. Well, she doesn't really love me. Oh, he's just trying to control me. Those deep things that come from other wounds in our life perhaps show up in the marriage. And unless you have a framework for kind of keeping those emotions under control so you can actually have a conversation, like it doesn't get very far. And I guess the last thing I'd say is, if you're a guy listening to this and you're like, hey, we've got a pretty good marriage, 90% of the time we get along great, but it's these two or three issues, right? Or it's just one issue. Whenever I try to bring it up, it just goes nowhere. It just blows up. And now I don't even want to talk about it. I don't even want to bring it up, because if I do, we're just going to both feel worse afterwards. It won't solve the problem. So I think what you're saying, Zach, is speaking hope into that situation, to say there is another way to do it, and it's not easy, but with practice, it can feel very different. And an argument that in the past went on for an hour and got nowhere could kind of find some resolution in like, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 minutes. Like you're kind of like, oh, maybe we didn't solve it completely, but man, this feels different. This feels a lot better.
Right. And if and if you're out there and you're like, look, we've tried a bunch of things, we just can't do it. That's why Mark and I do what we do, right?
Right.
And so if you guys are in that place, like reach out to us, right? Like we're here to help you. So sometimes you do need that referee. Sometimes it's gotten to a point where you just can't have these discussions.
Yep.
Um so yeah, reach out for help if you're feeling that. Mark, the other day in our, one of our meetings, you had mentioned a really, really great technique for how you could even start your sentences
Yes.
to maybe decrease the intensity of the fight. Would you want to share?
Sure. Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's essentially comes from that spirit of generosity, seeing the best in the other person, assuming the best, and kind of like choosing that path instead of the path of resentment and all or nothing thinking and assuming the worst, right? And it could be something as simple as saying, back to, say, imagine talking to the spouse. Hey, honey, like I'm I know you didn't intend this, or I'm sure it wasn't you weren't trying to do this, but when we had this conversation the other day, it actually like kind of hurt, and it made me feel disrespected, or it made me feel this way, or made me feel that way. Um, and I know sometimes we even want to get away from it made me, like we want to take responsibility for our own emotions too, but we're just kind of recognizing that cause and effect. Like, yeah, I know you didn't try. I'm sure you didn't try to, but like maybe I'm being oversensitive here, but it kind of stuck with me, and that's why I've been probably more grumpy than usual the last day. And I'm sorry it's taken all day for me to kind of muster up how to communicate this with
Mhm.
you, but here it is.
Mhm.
And there's something about assuming the best. I'm sure you didn't try to hurt me. Maybe being a little self-deprecating. Hey, maybe I'm being overset. Maybe I'm overreacting here, but here's the genuine feeling.
Mhm.
And because hopefully she's not feeling attacked, she's in a better position to express empathy or love in that moment. It still might be there's some defensiveness might rise up depending on the topic, right? But Yeah, I think there's something about that disarming where someone right off the bat, they're like, oh, they're giving me a way out. I didn't try to hurt them. That I appreciate that. Like they're not saying I'm a bad person. And now I don't have to defend that. I can just stick with what the topic is.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so good. I just love that. It's such a simple phrase, and even if that's the one thing you take away is, I'm sure you didn't mean this, but like that's such a powerful phrase to just kind of like de-escalate the situation. So good. So, but Mark, what if they tell us like, look, dude, we're at a place that if I try to put my point across in any way, it's going to blow up. If I say this is how it made me feel, then they take it personally. They say, oh, so you're saying I'm the bad guy, right? Okay. Have I got the thing for you? Okay. So
Oh, all right. Let's hear it.
here's the last thing. So they're called reflections. Okay. Reflections of thought, reflection of emotion. Now, Mark and I would have learned about these in our master's programs when we were learning how to be counselors. And there was a day where I was watching a video of a psychiatrist and he was teaching communication practices to people and he was teaching them these reflections. And I was like, what are you doing, dude? That's what you're supposed to do in counseling. And I was like, wait a second. If you could do it in counseling, why can't you do it in real life? And so I love teaching people reflections, what they are and how to use them. Um, it's also my favorite thing to use when I'm in a political discussion with someone and I really don't want
Ah,
to be in a political discussion with someone that, I just don't want to get into an argument, right? And so what are reflections? Where reflections are essentially where you pretend like you're a mirror. Okay. So someone says something to you and you bounce that thing back to them. Okay. So what does that mean? So your wife comes home and she says, um, Nancy, that jerk at work, is always talking behind my back to people. And I'm just sick of it. She's making me so angry. Now, as a dude, our first thought is let's fix the problem. Let's fix this, right? And so you're like, well, have you talked to your boss yet? And other idiot ideas that we come up with. Like, of course you would have thought of that if that thing would have worked, right? What your wife doesn't want in that moment is for you to problem solve. This is a thing that I'm still learning. I'm still learning this. And then whenever I try to problem solve and it doesn't work, I'm like, right, do a reflection. So, what does your wife want? Well, there's a show that maybe many of you have watched called Parks and Rec. And
good times.
there's this episode. Have you seen it, Mark?
Oh, love it. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe you remember this episode. So there's an episode where the Rob Lowe character, who is just always happy and problem solver and is always excited. He's just the greatest guy all the time. He's dating this girl who they end up getting pregnant. And so as she gets bigger and bigger and bigger, she's starting like her feet are hurting and her back hurts and all these things. And so Rob Lowe, like any good man, he's like, let me solve these problems for you. So he's like buying new gadgets for her and getting lotion and all this stuff. And it's annoying her to no end. And he doesn't even realize it. So friends have to sit him down and say, look, dude, you need to learn two words. That sucks. He's like, that sucks? They're like, yes, that sucks. Okay.
Yep.
So as the episode comes to an end, she starts to list all her problems. He starts to say that sucks. That is super powerful, guys. Like
Yeah.
just trying to do that. So when your wife comes home and she's listing off about how much of a jerk Nancy is, how do you do it? So you just summarize what she says and bounce it back, right? So wow, sounds like Nancy's really being a jerk to you.
Yeah.
Like that's all you got to say, right? You literally just say the thing back to her, right? So that's a reflection of thought, like what she's
Yeah.
saying. If you're doing reflection of emotion, she said, it's making me so angry. Man, I bet you're angry. That's infuriating, right? And what you're doing for her is you're confirming that she's not crazy.
Right.
You're confirming that you're listening, you're confirming that you're caring. And if you do that, that will also help to avoid fights. Any thoughts, Mark?
That's like magic right there, Zach. I mean, you have just saved so many conflicts for the guys listening to this. It's it tends to be a very true thing, and it might feel very odd and even almost beneath some guys to be like, really, I've just got to have my script. Like, I've got to be this like mirror actor. And yeah, kind of like, yeah, a little bit. Um, but I think we have to come back to the foundation, right? What's the foundation? I love my wife.
Mhm.
What do I see my role as? Okay, if big picture, I see myself as a protector. Well, that's not just keeping the bad guys away. That's like caring for her heart, right?
Mhm.
And helping her feel safe and connected. And kind of a metaphor that's kind of in the medicine is on my mind, medical stuff, because my 14-year-old son, blew out his knee in basketball.
Yeah.
It was rough,
Mhm.
like, and I'm just so
Mhm.
grateful to have an orthopedic surgeon who accurately diagnosed his problem,
Mhm.
did the right
Mhm.
imaging, did the right tests. Now we know
Mhm.
what to do.
Mhm.
And I think as guys, we misdiagnose the situation. When our wife is sharing negative, quote unquote, negative emotion or difficult feelings about something, we diagnose it as she's suffering. What is the most efficient path to eliminate her suffering? And then we problem solve. And it's in a good spirit. Like we genuinely want to express love that way. But what we're missing is, and you kind of hit on this, Zach, we're missing in the moment. The real diagnosis is she wants to connect with me.
Mhm.
She wants to feel heard. She wants to feel not crazy. She wants to feel like we're in this together. She wants to feel loved. And then once you hit the target with that, she's probably more than capable of finding a solution in her own time. And this is pretty cool. Sometimes even if you're in fix it mode as a guy, if you can be that mirror, that loving mirror and reflect back to her, and then she can like drop her shoulders and take that big sigh and just feel so much better afterwards. You let the dust settle for a little while, and maybe later that evening, she's like, what do you think I should do about Nancy?
Mhm.
By the way,
Mhm.
and guess what? Then she's actually asking your permission
Mhm.
to get some advice, get some insight.
Mhm.
But the timing is so much better because you've got the order right.
Mhm.
And you could even, I mean, maybe it feels a little bold, but if you reflectively listen well, at the end of that conversation, you could give her a big hug and be like, "Hey, if you ever want to talk about this again, you know me, I'm a fix-it guy, so I've always got ideas, but I'm sure you're more than capable of figuring it out. But if you want to talk more, I'm here."
Mhm.
Um, you plant that seed, and because she does hopefully respect you and your opinion, she may very well, in a different context, ask you for some advice about X, Y, or Z to quote unquote solve it. But again, in that moment, that's not typically not the fix it time.
Yeah, that's so perfect. And I love the idea of choosing the time for what you're going to do and getting permission from her to share your ideas. And a lot of times our wives are smart enough to figure it out on their own. Like
Right.
they actually don't need us to figure
Right.
it out for them. And oftentimes their solutions are way better than ours, right? Sometimes we've got better solutions, right? It
Yep.
just depends. But that's around the time that they ask us, right? Is if they have exhausted their thinking, but talking is thinking. You reflecting back allows her to get everything out of her head and to think out loud with you. And oftentimes she'll solve the problem on her own and you don't need to fix it. So by not fixing it, you fix it.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
that's profound, Zach. Talking, it's such a simple phrase, but like that talking is thinking.
Mhm.
I mean, I think that's so good for us as guys to hear because sometimes we think talking is venting, talking is gossiping, talking is we attach a negative connotation to talking about emotions.
Mhm.
But if talking is thinking, if talking is processing, if talking is kind of the journey to get to the solution that we ultimately want, then maybe that's something to lean into a little bit. And again, brush up on those skills, go
Mhm.
in with the right game plan. If you want to feel better about it and call it a battle plan, I mean, I don't
Mhm.
know. That
Battle
maybe
plan.
is
Mhm.
against what we're trying to do here. Uh, no winners and losers, right?
That's right.
But I love that.
That's
Yeah.
great. Well, any last thoughts, Mark, as we start to wrap?
What would I guess the final thought I'd have, Zach, is what would you say to a guy who said, "Okay, I'm doing the reflective listening thing. It seems like my wife feels better in the moment, but we never actually solve the problem. Like we never agree on like how often to connect, something like that.
Mhm.
Does it feel like it's an either or proposition? Like I'm just appeasing her in the moment, but we never actually solve it? Or do you feel like it works together? Like how does that work?
Yeah, so typically as people, this isn't always the case, but typically as people, we don't like advice. So how often are you taking your wife's advice? Almost never. Right? Maybe not. Maybe you're the guy out there that takes his wife's advice a lot, which means you're probably smart. But oftentimes we don't want advice on our end. We want to figure
Right.
it out on our end. And so how do you figure something out? Open-ended questions, right? And so what we're trained as counselors and what you can practice in your daily life as well is basically kind of like the Oreo method, right? Where you ask your wife a question. What was your day like today? Right? You ask an open-ended question, not did you have a good day, right? That ends the conversation. She's like, yes or no, right?
Hmm.
But open-ended question, tell me about your day today. Well, this jerk Nancy is gossiping about me. Wow, babe, that's tough. That's so hard to have someone gossiping about you. What else happened, right? Okay, so now we've done open-ended question reflection. So you're showing, hey, I'm listening, I care. And then you ask another open-ended question. She keeps talking, right? And so then you can ask her, what do you think you should do about this? Right? Have her solve the problem. What do
Right.
you think you should do about this? Right. And so if it's an
Hmm.
issue around just her, you have her solve it. And if she either asks you, hey, do you want advice, or you can ask her permission. Hey, I did have a thought. Would you be open to a suggestion? And if she
Right.
gives you permission, she's allowing you to start giving that advice, right? Now, if it's a problem
Yeah.
around sex, like we talked about earlier, where um uh she wants less frequency, you want more frequency, it would be something like you share how you're feeling. Like we said, that slow startup. Hey, I've been disappointed and I really want to connect with you. And she then says, well, I'm too busy. I would, but we're so busy. And then you say, okay, well, what can we do to take off some of that load, right? So
Yeah.
open-ended questions, make them your best friend and keep having the other person solve. And if they can't solve, then you can say, hey, I have a thought. Would you mind if I make a suggestion? And that's
Sure.
kind of your foot into the door,
Yeah.
to start to give your input. Any thoughts on your end, Mark?
I love that, Zach. I mean, I think that sense of respecting the autonomy of the other person
Mhm.
and that they have the freedom to speak their mind, things aren't too forced, right? Because if any of us feels like controlled, it doesn't go so well, right?
Mhm.
And I love the we language that
Mhm.
you are using. Like,
Mhm.
how can we solve this problem? Because I
Mhm.
think sometimes when people stuck in a place of frustration or loneliness or disagreement about something like this, something like sex or intimacy, um, there can be this feeling of isolation where it feels like I have to solve this, or man, why should I have to solve this? They should solve it. And there could be this like inner unhelpful dialogue and back and forth of emotions. And even saying the word we lights up something in our brains that says we're a team.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, that's what we want anyway, right? I mean, this is like the marriage covenant. This is like the till death do us part. It's not just we promise never to divorce each other, but I'm not going to really try in between,
Mhm.
between now and death. It's like, no, like it's we're not only are we promising to be faithful and love each other, but we're going to work at it. Like love
Mhm.
is an action, not just a
Mhm.
feeling, right?
Mhm.
And so I think those are powerful, powerful ideas that you're communicating, Zach, and just like so empowering for guys to know that like there's a tried and true method and process that they can try to implement on their own and maybe see some gains. And if it turns out because of tough patterns or things they can't control, or maybe some things they need to work out within themselves, that they could reach out for some extra help and get someone to counsel or coach them, and I know we do that with a lot of guys and we're happy to help if needed. um, and for some guys it's a hybrid. It's like, man, I'm gonna go in and get a little extra support, um, but try to do this on my own as well and see what happens, see if I can see a shift happen. So
Mhm.
um, But anyway, yeah, I mean, I really appreciate you sharing all that, Zach. I think it's just so cool to see how your expertise in like the cognitive behavioral therapy and your insights from Gottman kind of dovetail together in this
Mhm.
way that can be really helpful for probably all relationships, but in specifically with couples like we're talking about today.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah, and just as a reminder to everyone, as we're kind of coming to a close, if you've enjoyed this video, make sure you click on that subscribe button, that notification bell, so that we can notify you for future videos. If you're looking for help, if you need extra help, just reach out to us at escapethecagenow.com or in the link in description box. We would love to be able to help you if you're having problems with communication, if you're having problems in your marriage. That's the kind of stuff that we help couples with.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Zach. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.